communities and the inspiration. But the fact is, what we do is also business. It's an industry. And that too is a story that has to be told. You know, how we touch the local economy, how we support jobs, how we generate government revenue, how we're tourism drivers. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're also going to expand the conversation a little bit beyond that, because obviously there's more to it, you know, than just the economy. There's social impact, there's community well-being and education. So we'll hit some of those other pieces as well. Hopefully everybody picked up, there's a couple of handouts, 1 out of 10 reasons to support the arts in Houston in 2024, and so we'll kind of use that as the checklist. So anyway, arts and economic prosperity, and the year we're going to talk about today is 2022. I always like to preface that because we all remember what was going on before that, right? That whole pandemic thing, which was absolutely devastating to the arts. And we know it, but you know what? The data underscored that as well. And it's nice sometimes when the data actually show, like, oh my God, I feel so tired, and now I know why. 99% of arts and cultural organizations in this country had to cancel programming, suspend operations, close. Many of those never reopened. Johns Hopkins University, they actually track employment at all the nation's nonprofit organizations. It's like about 1.6 million nonprofits in the US, maybe 110,000 of them are arts nonprofits. Arts nonprofits lost jobs at 5 times the rate of all nonprofits. And, you know, I mean, we all heard it, right? First to close, last to reopen. And, you know, the organizations have reopened, and, you know, audiences are working their way back faster for some areas, less so for others. Staffing, though, however, is not all the way back. And so we're doing the work. The jobs are not completely back yet. And that's just sort of a larger national observation. But even the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis at Department of Commerce, you know, they finally did the big study, like, all right, well, what was the impact of the pandemic, you know, on the nation's economy? And we all heard about tourism and airlines and lodging. Well, they called out the arts, and especially the performing arts, as among the most devastated industries. So, challenging time, you know, we all felt it, and the numbers reflect it. Interestingly, though, not every number was headed downward. There was one that was crazy upward during the pandemic, and that was personal participation in the arts, people making art. And we did a big national public opinion survey last year, and one of the questions we did, one of the largest, you know, ever conducted, 37% of the American population said, yeah, I tried some kind of new arts, crafts, music, creative expressive form during the pandemic. 1/3 of the American public said, yeah, I tried something new. You know, Amazon was writing about these, like, this mysterious spike in ukulele sales. And, you know, I mean, how many loaves of sourdough bread were left on your doorstep over those years, right? So, I don't know, anybody try anything new during the pandemic? All right, you don't want to share? Go ahead.
I started with the bread making, and then it went on to cocktails.
Oh, sorry, finish there.
I bought a 3D printer and learned to do 3D design.
Great. Who else?
I got into composting and drinking.
Well, the research says 1/3 of the room did, so I'm just a little shy still, but don't worry, we're also going to make this a little engaging and interactive, so there'll be some points for discussion along the way. I myself took up knitting during the pandemic. I'd always wanted to try. My grandmother, my aunts, they always knit. I always loved the clickety-clack of the needles, and you know, wherever that knitting was going on, that's where the most interesting conversation was, and, right? So, but I gotta tell you, I'm not very good. I mean, I make the world's longest scarves. You know? But even just like trying to get 18 stitches in a row. I mean, you can't practice your art form and be stressed about like, what is on the other side of this pandemic, and is there a place for me? And when all of that. And it was really just provide so much emotional relief. And interestingly, the research shows I wasn't the only one that happened to. I don't know, maybe you noticed the same thing with the drinks. And but we were part of a big international research study, Americans for the Arts, University College London, University of Florida, where we looked at tens of thousands of people who did these weekly surveys for us during the pandemic. Because remember, right, mental health issues tripled, loneliness, isolation, skyrocketing. And so people did, thank God, many of them, thank you, did these surveys about like their activities and their emotional well-being and some different things. Short story, what we found is that during the pandemic, people who had a half hour a day of some kind of arts, creative, expressive experience, it may have been going to the arts, making the arts, could have been culinary, gardening, right? Big umbrella. Half hour a day, lower rates of depression, lower rates of anxiety, higher rates of life satisfaction. One more study to put on the mountain of how arts improve, our well-being and our mental health. So even during the pandemic. So anyway, of course, eventually it was time to get out, again after the pandemic. And I'm in the DC area where we've got lots of museums. And my wife and I are like, all right, well, let's start with the museum. Seemed like a nice, safe way to try things out. And now that I am a fiber artist, that's a laugh. We've got a great textile museum in Washington, D.C., and we have never been there. And so I thought, wow, let's do the textile museum, and I can feel my kinship with the other artists. So, what do we do? First thing is, like, are they even open? So we went online. We found their website, and they were open. Here were their hours, and safety protocol, wear your mask, keep your distance. And we read about a couple of the exhibitions that were going on, and scrolled through a lot of the images, and clicked the button, pulled out the credit card, we bought a couple of tickets, right? So, we were all set. It was only the next day that I was informed that we'd be dressing up for this, finally getting back out. So we hadn't even gotten out the door, and there was like some jewelry and, new shirt, some different things happening there. So like the retail spending had already begun. So Saturday comes, we jump in the car, we drive downtown, and not too far for us, 6 miles, park in the parking garage, $10, get my stuff from the guy, and we're all set. And on the way to the museum, we stopped and had lunch. Is that something we do, right, when we're having an arts experience? Make an event out of it. So there's a wonderful restaurant downtown there, near a lot of the arts organizations. It's called Founding Farmers. Seeing a couple heads nod here. Yeah, it's farm to fork. Everything's grown within 50 miles. It's great. It is not inexpensive. $70 lunch. So, but it was leisurely. We were back out, so it was great. And then from there, it was about a half dozen block walk to the museum. And we got there, and again, I'd never been. There's beautiful, modern architecture, and we got in. We got our program, and I got to tell you though, my first sensory experience being in the museum wasn't like a 1,000-year-old tapestry. They had those, amazing. Or like one of the quilt shows. It was the air conditioning. Because, and here we are, right? Because it was August in Washington, D.C. And, it's like blast furnace outside. You can all relate. But I just remember like, oh my God, I've seen nothing. I already love this place, And so then we spent the afternoon and we saw the exhibitions. We heard a talk by one of the curators and hit the gift shop on the way out. And then, made our way home and everything. And it was just such a nice, memorable day. So turn the tape back a couple of days to the week before, when we sort of first had this idea without, when are they even open? And we went to their website and we found their website. We take this for granted, right? We've all got websites. Arts organizations have websites. That means we've got web designers and computer programmers, and we've got connectivity fees, and we pay for the photography and the writing that populates that site, right? And we've ordered tickets online. So you got the e-commerce and the finance people. They're seeing a little bit of that action. There was, again, we bought some things, there was some retail clothing buys in the next couple of days. And then Saturday came, we went downtown, we parked in the parking garage. I gotta tell you, that part of DC, during the week, you can't get in that garage. And we gotta get there at 5:30 in the morning. Fills up. On the weekend, if it wasn't for those arts organizations, that place would just be closed, because there is nothing else going on there. That guy that gave me my stuff, that's a job. There's a company that owns and manages those parking garages. And then we went out to the restaurant, right? And some of the $70 is going to the growers and producers of the food. Everybody's within 50 miles. And the waiters bring home some personal income, the owner some entrepreneurial income. So there's all of that economic activity. And then there was the trudge to the museum, and you ever notice whenever you go to an arts event, you're always getting paper? Even tonight, we're sending you home with paper. There's a program, right? And there's postcards. Printers make bank off of arts. They really do. And it's a graphic artist that's doing the design work. And again, the printing, it's always thick, heavy stock, full color, glossy coated, thousands and thousands of units. When you go and talk to the business community, just like ask who the printers in the room, just start throwing out a few basic printing numbers. Data we've all got. And they'll be like, oh man, I need to pay more attention to this market. Because again, I love the arts, but I don't really always think of it as an industry. The utility bill, I don't know what the utility bill is for this place or for that museum, but like all businesses that have a facility, there's all of that activity. People, when they think about arts as a business, it might not be until they hear a talk from the curator or they see a performance on the stage. But the fact is, we've got accountants and auditors, and if you're here, you got plumbers and electricians and security staff and marketing people and box office people. We support a range of industries across the community. And all of that is what we're talking about with this Arts and Economic Prosperity Study. Looking at the economic impact of us as organizations, nonprofit arts and culture organizations, and the event-related spending by arts audiences. All right. Is that good? Everyone sort of following me so far? Okay. Well, let's start to get into this a little bit. Some of this may be a little hard to see. We'll share the PowerPoint in case anybody wants to see more of it. So, Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, gives you an idea, we've done this before. Actually, we've done we've done it for 30 years. So we've been at these for a while. It is a national economic impact study of nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences. You can already see he's doing that Washington, D.C. thing with his fingers. What's he hiding? Yes, our nonprofit organizations, but we also, because a lot of times the community connects to the arts and the artists. It might be a program at a library or a faith-based organization or a social service organization. So that's what we're looking at. What was not included: commercial galleries, Hollywood motion pictures, architecture firms, design, gaming design. A lot of individual artists really were not part of this as well. And let me just say, you are part of this industry, and beyond just being connected with the organizations, and I see you and I know you are there, and one of these days I look forward to having individual artists be part of this study, but there's a bunch of methodological challenges in getting people to respond to the data. So we can talk more about that. But this is the box of what we are studying. And a lot of times folks ask, well, why focus just on that? Well, when the city or the county, when government or private sector funds the arts and invests in the arts, that's typically where those dollars are going. And it's an appropriate question to ask. What's the public's ROI on that, right? Cultural benefits, of course, we get it. But what else you got? Tell me about your economic benefits. Because every industry out there has their economic impact calling card. Now the arts have one too. So it's nonprofit, it's national, Houston and Harris County, the 10-county region. There we are. Everybody catch this technical effect? 373 study regions across all 50 states and Puerto Rico. Study communities as small as 4,000 people, as large as multi-million people communities. Even in small rural communities, if the arts are happening there, economic impact is happening there as well. All right, let me tell you a couple things real quick about the study itself, and then we'll dive into some numbers. First, it's nonprofit, we talked about that. And we take a very reliable, trusted approach to economic impact. Because, you know what, this is an advocacy tool. And I want to make sure you feel as confident as possible using these data. And like, like you got all the credibility behind you, and you do. So I have a team of economists who advise us, but we use what's called an in-plan platform. It's an economic analysis platform. And it's the same system that more than 1,000 cities and states subscribe to. So it's good enough for them, it's going to be good enough for us. But here's why it's great. It allows us to customize input-output analysis models for every single community that we study. And that's important because $50 spent here in Houston is going to have a different economic impact than 50 spent in Dallas, 50 in Austin, and on down the line, right? Every community is a little bit different. So it's very localized. We take a very conservative approach to economic impact. We partner with the Houston Arts Alliance on this, and they sent surveys out to more than 1,000 organizations, large, small, community-based ones. We heard back from 169 of them, and if anyone who did a survey here, thank you very much. 169, and that's what we go with. We only use data from the organizations that provide it. So we don't make estimates for non-respondents. We didn't just say, well, we got a core of the organizations, one client, everything's like 4. No. We just say, here are the numbers we have. So every number I talk about, we can put our hands all over and realize this, there is more out there. So it's conservative, it's reliable, it's nonprofit. Right, so what else did we find? So what did we actually find? This is again 2022. Total economic activity, $1.3 billion. Just right here, city of Houston. Billion with a B. $1.3 billion of economic activity. That makes Houston one of the largest economic activity cities in the country. So this is a really significant number. You can see it's actually made up of 2 figures. First is spending by the organizations themselves. $664 million, that's on the left side, by just those 169 responding organizations. And again, that's a lip buster for folks. This reminds us that arts organizations are businesses that employ people locally in the community, that purchase goods and services from other businesses in the community. We're members of the Chamber of Commerce, and we're, help drive tourism. Arts organizations are good business citizens. And that right there is a story worth telling. Now, no surprise, arts organizations have an economic impact. I could give you a $5 bill and my economist will chase you around and tell you what the impact of that is. But few industries generate the kind of event-related spending that the arts do, right? And just remember, that's dinner and parking, and babysitting, and maybe some lodging. And you add up all of that, $659 million in audience spending. We'll break that down a little bit. But again, that is a lot of economic activity. I can tell you the numbers are almost, definitely bigger now. Everything's been coming back. All right, so what's the economic impact of that? Well, the first thing we look at is jobs. Jobs, 19,552 jobs supported as a result of that $1.3 billion of spending. Now remember, these aren't jobs only in arts and culture organizations. These are jobs supported through the community. And they're not just artists either. Because our arts organizations, right, we've got accountants, we've got auditors, we've got, security staff and plumbers and everything else. I don't know who the utility company employs, but we pay that utility bill, that helps support some jobs. And then there's the hospitality aspect of that as well. A little something about those jobs. First, these are necessarily local jobs. Ours is not an industry that's going to be offshore, right? We need the performers right here in the theater. We need the curators painting the art. We need the arts educators in the schools. We need the arts therapists in the hospitals. These are local jobs. And I got to tell you, jobs is just something that legislators pay attention to. You ask any elected leader their 3 priorities, and there's a good chance they'll tell you, jobs, jobs, and jobs, right? So we're just connecting our arts and culture product to their to their priorities of jobs. Bottom line, arts, not just food for the soul, putting food on the table for 19,552 households right here in Houston. All right, what else can we look at? Government revenue. And, there's a lot of government leaders that yes, of course I love the arts, I fund the arts, but in their minds, honestly, they see those dollars as like a one-way trip out of town. But what this study shows us is that local, state, and federal government revenue, $207.5 million. Just the local government, $31.8 million. So that is a big return on the local government's investment in the arts. And again, arts and culture, it's not some black hole of goodness that we're pouring dollars into, right? It's giving back to the community, culturally and economically. And I gotta tell you, jobs, government revenue, especially local government revenue, it's gonna be very resonant with your local elected leaders because they need the revenue to help pay for all these services, right? So a really powerful story there. All good so far? Follow me? All right, great. Let's start to break down the audience spending piece a little bit. And again, this is really kind of the value-added aspect for the arts. These data are based on 1,385 audience surveys and a whole range of arts and culture events across the city. So it's performing, it's visual, it's free festivals, it's all different kinds of events. A really great representative sample and a huge statistical oversample. Good job, Houston Arts Alliance. We only actually needed 850. Plug your ears because next time we want more. But this is a statistical oversample, really strong data. The typical attendee to a nonprofit arts and culture event in Houston in 2022 spent $41.09 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. $41.09. By the way, this is a couple dollars ahead of the national average. So this is a pretty high rate of spend. And you can see how these dollars break down. This might be small, but it's on your study one-pager. But almost half of it's on food and local transportation. There was like parking and shopping and clothing. There was a couple of shirt and some jewelry that accompanied it. Different kinds of things. Some of you might be looking at lodging. Wow, can you still get a room for $3.45? And which is why. So number one, when we do the survey, we only count one night of lodging. Because your tourism people might say, like, wow, these numbers are really low. But they might be counting 3 to 4 nights of lodging, which is a much longer stay. But we just wanted to know, very conservative, what's the impact of your spending related to this arts event that you're attending? So, and not everyone's got a lodging cost. So that's why it's so low, and it's just one night. Other is fascinating. So nationally, we had 224,000 audience surveys. There's a lot of data. But there was some great stories. So there was a farmer in Wisconsin, just give you one, who paid somebody $60 to milk his cows so he could go to the theater that night. Isn't that great? We're doing what it takes to get to the arts. You know, so there's not that dairy in the sermon next time. All right. In addition to how much did you spend related to that arts event, we also asked people for their zip code. Because we want to find out, do they live in Harris County, which would make them local, or are they from outside the county? 32% came from outside your giant county. I mean, you really got to travel to get it here from outside the county. And so then do these folks spend differently? Yeah, absolutely they do. $53.82 per person per event, not including the cost of admissions. That's the red one. And, you know, that's where you see, you know, the lodging, for example. So we asked those non-local attendees one more question, which was, why are you here? We're glad you're here. Thanks for coming. You're here on business, you're visiting friends and family, two very common reasons people travel, right? 83% said we came specifically for this arts event, right? So you can really see the pulling power of the arts. A little bit about the that lodging figure. So 32% come from outside the county. 9.8, so let's call it 10%, of those folks had a lodging cost. Those people spent $199 per person. So you know, you get that head in the bed, that's when the cash register really started ringing, right? And that's what the arts do. They attract people to the community. Puts heads in beds, and cheeks in seats, and derrieres and cafe chairs. Right? So, you know, we are good for local business. And one more thing about the audience spending, just those 169 organizations, total attendance of 15.6 million people. And we are putting a lot of feet on the street, and that is good for local merchants. So there's a great story to tell there with that. All right, so that's the audience piece. I want to expand. And also this is one of my favorite parts too. We asked all the arts organizations about their volunteers. So let's face it, the volunteer army does so much to keep our organizations going, humming, bringing their cultural product to the community, having this impact. And so just those 169 organizations had over 13,000 volunteers that donated over 456,000 hours. And you can actually put a value on that because we're commodifying everything today, right? So there's an organization in DC, it's called Independent Sector. They study volunteerism and nonprofits and all that stuff nationally. In Texas, in 2022, the value of the average volunteer hour, $29.86. And that's any volunteer, any nonprofit. But you do the math, you got $13.6 million in volunteer value. Now, that actually is not part of the $1.3 billion. I want to emphasize that because there's not really any dollars changing hands here. But it just gives you an idea of like the value, the contribution of our volunteers. And this is a way for you to figure out the volunteer value in your organization. Just count up the people, count up the hours, your board people, anybody who volunteers doing anything. And then you can run your own numbers, do your own calculation there. And by the way, everything I talk about today is in a 58-page report, which is on the Arts Alliance website. And you can download it, and that's in there as well, so in case you forget. Okay, we also asked some social impact questions this time, and that was a little something we did. You know, we might be thinking about, well, what are we going to do this weekend? And, you know, we've got a couple choices. And which one has the best economic impact? Askability ever, right? You know, but, so, like, what do the arts mean to us? And so all the attendees, you know, that we answered these 4 questions for us. And, you know, all these percentages in the 80s, you know, more than 4 and 5 people, 86% of the population said this arts event or this venue was a source of pride and community identity for me. Similar percentage, I feel a sense of loss if this were no longer available. And one of the ones that turned out to be the most interesting at the bottom there, 82%, said, it's important to me that this be available for future generations. And what that tells me is that arts and culture, it's not a one-time transactional moment, right? We don't just do it and blah, go on to the next thing, right? It's part of our story, our community story. It's about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And you know what? The public gets this as well. I just think, that kind of community connectedness, that's something that the arts do. The arts really connect us and unify us as a community. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. So, great ways to complement the economic numbers, because there's just more than the economics. When you download the report, you flip it to the back side, the back cover, you're going to see a bunch of national partners on your Houston study. So I'm in DC, right? I already confessed that, so I'm sorry. It's not my fault. But so DC is the land of national organizations, right? There's so many national organizations in Washington, DC. There's actually a national organization for the national organizations. But you can make this work for you, right? Because there's organizations like the U.S. Conference of Mayors. That's where all our mayors go to get together a couple times a year and talk about what's on their mind. Or National Association of County for county leaders and city managers. They're always at ICMA. Tourism people, Destinations International, our community advancement organizations, Race Forward, Conference Board. If you're in the business community, you pay attention to what they're talking about. These organizations are all national partners on your study for two reasons. First, they too believe arts and culture is a fundamental component of a healthy community. And two, they buy into the methodology, and they buy into the results. Trust me, they thought this thing was going to sink down the road, they're not going to get anywhere near it. So when you go and advocate, we're going to talk a little bit about advocacy in a bit, remember to flip that over to the back side. And I'll tell you, give you an example. So International City Managers Association, study back, one of the local arts agency directors in Southern California was trying to get more of the hotel tax dollars, right? We got good hotel tax dollars for the arts here. And, her point was like, look, you know what? We're putting heads in beds, we're bringing people to the community. We all like the output, but you got to invest in the product too, right? This is what we're talking about here. You want that, you got to invest in the product. And so she's talking to the city manager and, the study of the data, and meanwhile she said the whole time he's like looking through his papers and going through a file. And she thought, oh well, it's going to be one of those meetings where he's like half listening. And then he pulls out a magazine, Public Management. And that's the monthly magazine that city managers read. And he turns to an article, a 6-page article about the economic impact study, Arts and Economic Prosperity, which we placed. And he's like, yes, I know I heard about this. Yeah, this is great. We should definitely talk about this. So, it's top down, bottom up, right? And so, U.S. Conference of Mayors, go on their website. They got a bunch of resolutions talking about the importance of this study. And I'll give you a website, I'll tell you to so you go secretap6.americansforthearts.org. You can find all of this kind of stuff on the website. But, it's going to just help increase the credibility of your case making. So remember the national partners. Let's see. The public gets this as well. So back to the National Public Opinion Survey I did. When I say, biggest ever done, we do 3,060 interviews as part of our public opinion study. Most of what you read in the newspaper, if you're lucky, has 1,000 interviews. So this stuff is super reliable. We use Ipsos, one of the top survey research firms in the world. They do it on behalf of us. So 86% of the American public says, yeah, arts improves, community livability, quality of life. That's no surprise. However, 79% also agree that the arts, good for local businesses, good for local jobs, good for the economy. But we just got to remember to remind people first about Remember that last time you went to an arts event and how you may have spent $41.09 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. You know, you're just like, did you have dinner? And then usually you hear people say like, spent a lot more than 41 bucks. So, but when we tell that story, it really resonates with the public. These are really powerful, really resonant data. And there it is. Okay, so the citywide data are great. You know, fabulous. $1.3 billion, and there's national data and everything like that. But like, you know, what do I do for my organization? And so when you download that 58-page report and you turn to page 28, you're going to find the Arts and Economic Prosperity in Houston calculator. And all you need is two numbers, and you can calculate your organization's economic impact. It could be yours, it could be a group of them, you know, whatever. Total expenditures and total attendance. And you can do this on the back of a napkin. It's really easy. It's a step-by-step thing. But then when you're writing your grants, you know, and for funding, it's like, here's how we transform the community and lives, and we did this. And here's our economic impact. This is jobs that we support, government revenue that we generate. So you can really tell your organization's story. And it's so simple. It's so simple, I accidentally used a calculator that somebody told me doesn't even have a clear button. So that was a mistake, but you know, that's how easy this is to use. You don't even need to hit the clear button. So that is a tool that everybody can use. Now, a lot of times people are like, well, 1.3 billion, is that a lot or a little? Sounds like a lot. Honestly, like $1 billion sounds like a lot to me. But so how does the area stack up? Well, there were a number of cities that were also in Texas cities that were part of this. You know, there's a little pride thing that goes on in this state, you know, but you guys are rocking it. Look at this. You know, just the numbers tell the story. You know, this is a great arts community. You know, tons of cultural opportunities. But again, you know, one that requires investment. You know, and we can't take any of this for granted. Anyway, Houston stacks up exceedingly well here. So let me pause there a second. That is arts and economic prosperity. And I'm going to, in a second, kind of widen the conversation a little bit because everybody does wonder, like, well, yeah, nonprofit, that's cool, but like, what about the rest of it? And there's a story for that too. But are there any questions, conversations, concerns, worries about arts and economic prosperity? Good, yeah, a couple. One and then two and then three.
I have a question about how the arts stack up to other industries. Do you have any?
So how do the arts stack up to other industries? You know, we only did the arts. You can actually, if you want to go online, it's like top 20 employers or something like that. And you can, you know, compare, you know, jobs that are supported, that type of thing is one way to do it. One question I get, though, is specifically related to sports, you know, because sports does have a lot of event-related spending, and I come at this as a sports fan, and believe me, and I believe that a great city has got all of it, right? It's got arts and culture and sports and parks and you know, great restaurants and everything else. But if you actually, so my office, I'm just around the corner from the Washington Post. Everybody remember All the President's Men, you know, the movie? Follow the money. So if you follow the dollars, though, often two stories start to evolve. So, you know, the football stadium, and the team won yesterday, but you know what? That's 10 home days, best case scenario. Your art centers, they're running 4, 5, 6, 7 nights a week. You know, and we are putting steady, you know, people out in the community, in the restaurants, that type of thing. And in fact, and I'm going to run this, but every city that has done this analysis, if you add up total attendance, so like 15.6 million attendees in Houston, you know, compare that to sports attendance, you know, the arts often come out a higher attendance, you know, so, but, you know, it's if not higher, way up there, right? So there's some ways to compare that, but then where are those dollars going? often, with sports, those dollars are going to, it's like $20 for a little foam rubber number one, and that's going to the national concessionaire. You see Aramark on the bunting sometimes, and if those concessionaires aren't based in your hometown, those dollars are leaking out of the community very quickly. Your athletes, your owners, live in the city, out of the city, different homes, that kind of stuff. But how about those arts dollars? Those dollars, again, the art centers are going, many nights per week, and they're going to local merchants. They're going to the local restaurants right around here, and the local parking garages. So they're staying in the community longer, having more of a local economic churn. So less leakage, longer in the community, greater economic impact. So that's a story. You can think about looking at the numbers that way as well. So that's some ways when people ask about comparing, the industries. Is one way to think about it. I'll get back to you in a sec. You had a question? Yeah, please.
How is Austin not on the list?
So Austin did not participate in this study. So communities had to want to step up and participate. And Austin's got a big arts community, and they've got the state museums and all that kind of stuff. But I don't have the Austin numbers. So if they participated, they have in the past, but that's why they're not on this list. Yeah.
If I were to advocate for the devil, I'm thinking almost anything generates revenue. So we could be subsidizing stores at the Galleria, we could be subsidizing, any given business down the street here. So we could be subsidizing sports, which we do in some ways through stadiums. So if we come to a council member or mayor, why the arts? Why does that not open up? Why is that not a slippery slope into supporting all kinds of things?
Well, number one, you're right, all kinds of things are supported. It's a great point. We can't ever forget the fundamental reason and the benefits that the arts bring to us as individuals and as a community. That, honestly, right there is why we should be funding the arts. But the fact is, a lot of our elected leaders just need to look at life through this economic lens because there's a lot of demand, for those dollars. And this gives them those economic measures to show that, again, those dollars, that investment in the arts, yes, cultural benefits, which should be enough, but also economic benefits. And we'll also talk about workforce attraction, we'll talk about education, healthcare, and really, when we invest in the arts, we're building a healthier, stronger Houston. And if you give me a few minutes after this, I'll maybe help and provide some evidence on that. And, hopefully that'll help answer that question. But the question was, anything with an investment, public investment's going to have an economic impact. As I was saying, right? $5 to you in my income, this will measure it. But have other people had to face that question, or look down, talk to a city council person and had a response or different response? Yeah.
It just seems like arts always is the first thing to go because safety is more of a concern and infrastructure and things like that people need, right? But art is a luxury.
Yeah.
So that's the conversation we usually talk about.
Right. Yeah. That's a tough one. But then obviously we need to feel safe. And that type of thing in our community. Interestingly, though, there's great arts. There's great research that shows where the arts are present, where we've got murals and sculptures and arts organizations. Communities are safer, and it does promote more pro-social health and less criminal engagement with young people. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of research as well too. And I'll also tell you another story in a little bit. I'll just save that one. But there's even police chiefs who we got to invest in the arts as well. So, but I'm going to save that as like a showstopper. So we'll come back to it. So, I don't want to give up on my material. But yeah, that's what it's a healthy community has all of this. And what we're going to talk about next is livable communities. Why do we live here? because arts and culture helps create this very livable community. You know, a safe police state is not necessarily the place we may want to be, you know, for a long time. Who knows? Yes, please.
Quick question, on one of your slides, you had local versus non-local.
Yes.
What do you consider local?
Harris County. Harris County was local, 32% came from outside of Harris County. So 1 in 3. Yes, you got your hand.
I lived in the DMV and now I live here. How does it benefit those small towns around these big areas? How do you, because in order to show your appreciation for the arts, people sometimes have to travel quite a ways to go to the game, to go to their performance. How do they get something in their community? How do we reach them?
Right, so smaller communities in the region outside of the big
There are a lot of small
downtown.
communities between here and Austin.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, if you look at the traveler and the tourism research, travelers these days, domestic travelers, international travelers, are looking for authentic cultural experiences. You know, when they come to some place, yeah, you know, you want to experience what's happening in downtown, but they actually want to get into the neighborhoods. They want to see the culturally, the ethnically diverse neighborhoods, the culinary that goes with all of that, the heritage and the history of the community. Why do people live here? Where, you know, where does everybody go to eat? So our smaller communities, you know, are all about that. And so, you know, a lot of times it's just, you know, packaging. So we need more than just a big center city, right? We need to be investing in all the organizations in the region. So I would say it's just as important to tourism because it's part of the visitor experience is what people are looking for. One of the things we did as part of this is we did 299 of the surveys at organizations serving communities of color, or culturally specific arts and culture organizations, and we interviewed attendees at those. So out of the 1,000, so out of the almost 1,400, 299 of them came specifically at those organizations, those surveys. And what we found is there's almost no difference in audience spending and in the audience, the social impact numbers. Literally pennies difference in audience spending, tenths of percents of difference in social impact. And this actually reflects what we see nationally. You know, nationally, I said we did 224,000 audience surveys. 38,000 of them were at organizations serving communities of color, BIPOC organizations. And again, similarly, you know, just pennies difference, tenths of percents difference. And some research is like the beginning of a conversation. And this is something that can be a conversation for here in this community. Because in most places, those BIPOC organizations and organizations of color are not competing well philanthropically. I don't know what the case is here, and so I don't want to make any judgments here. But I can tell you, a couple of years ago, I did a big national study looking at 550 cities and their grant making, and like thousands and thousands and thousands of grants. Let's see, if you just look by budget size, the top 16% pulled about by budget size, pulled about 3/4 of the money, right? And then, you know, typically those are going to be, you know, your larger European tradition organizations. California just did a huge multi-year study looking at state funding, looking at all the foundations, the private sector, you know, is you know, complicit, not complicit, but is part of all this as well. So we really need to be rethinking how the allocations go and looking at that, and having important conversations about this, because the impacts, the social and economic impacts are almost identical, right? So that's also part of smaller communities, and it's not just BIPOC, it could be smaller organizations, you know, that are part of this as well. So put that out there as something that's in the report, read about it, explore it. But, I think there's some good conversations in there as well to be had. Okay. All right. We're good with that. I got everybody. I just sort of threw a big one out there just now. So, all right. I want to now widen the lens a little bit on this economic impact. We're back to the economic impact. So, we focused on nonprofit organizations, right? But what about our commercial art galleries and our Hollywood motion pictures and our architecture firms? So, about a dozen years ago, the federal government started doing some of this research. And like, hey, welcome to it. We've been doing it for 30 years, and they were like, okay, nonprofit, that's good. But then they widened the lens to include everything else. And what they did is they looked at the whole nation's economy and basically pulled out any arts dollar that they could find. Nationally, in 2022, arts and culture, a 1.1 trillion with a T, dollar industry in the United States. Trillion, that is 4.3% of the nation's economy. That's huge. 5.2 million jobs. But now what's great is they do statewide versions of this as well. And so you can see right here in Texas, and state is as deep as they go on this, unfortunately. I'm trying to push on like, give me metropolitan areas next, right? We want local. But even statewide, $59.3 billion industry, that is 2.5% of the state's economy. Is that a lot or a little? It's bigger than education, bigger than utilities, bigger than agriculture. So when you talk to your legislators about the value of the arts to our communities, especially your state legislators, they're like, well, I love the arts, but we got to focus on business and jobs. Arts clearly a business here, and 383,000 jobs across the state as well. One other thing that the economists have figured out, because they've been doing this research long enough now, is that there is a causal relationship between a growth in arts jobs and a growth in all employment in the state. You want to grow employment? Grow arts jobs. One of the reasons is that the arts diversify an economy. Remember all the different kinds of people we employ, all the industries throughout the community, and then there's a bunch of other economic reasons as well. So really amazing data, powerful data. And again, this is the Bureau of Economic Analysis, top economic shop on the planet. The data are impressive, but the very fact that they do this research is also a story in itself. Because BEA, they look at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of industries, but they only do a couple of dozen of these satellite accounts. This is called the Arts and Cultural Production Satellite Account, by the way. It's number 1 on your 10 reasons. And there's got to be some kind of strategic reason for them to do this. And this is an understanding that in a global economy, innovation is how you prosper, right? We're in an innovation economy in this world. And it's an understanding that creativity drives innovation, arts drives creativity. You want to lift up innovation, push on the arts. So really spectacular data for the state. And the government, the BEA, isn't the only one that gets this. You know what? The business community gets this as well. Tomorrow we'll be with the Great Houston Partnership and visiting with them again and talking to the business community. So I want to tell you about a report called Ready to Innovate, and it's done by the Conference Board. I mentioned them earlier. Conference Board is the National Organization for Big Business. They give you the leading index of economic indicators, the Consumer Confidence Index. If you're a business scholar, this is what you want to do research for. Their research shows that creativity is now among the top 5 applied skills that business leaders are looking for. And in fact, it's leapfrogged the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. But now as researchers, we talk about it like, well, of course you gotta read, write, and do math. But if you can take some creativity and apply that to your scientific, your engineering, your coding, your agriculture knowledge, those are the high-paying, innovative jobs and industries we're all trying to attract to our community. In this study, Ready to Innovate, just Google it, 72% of business leaders say creativity is of high importance in hiring. 85% of that group says, can't find the people we're looking for. So the researchers said, all right, well, there's no typing test for creativity, we get that. How do you know if you got a creative person, across the table from you? So they asked a bunch of questions. 2 indicators way at the top. 1, starting your own business, so entrepreneurial activity. And 2, study of the arts, especially while in college. And they write in the conclusion of this report, it's clear that the arts, music, drum, dance, literature, media, provide skills sought by employers of the 3rd millennium. And again, business scholars writing for business leaders. And here's what this kind of looks like in action. So 2 years ago, we used to have our board chair at Americans for the Arts was a banker. He was a big-time banker because at the same time he was chair of Americans for the Arts, he was also chair of the American Banking Association, right? So, and he would always say, when I'm interviewing somebody, I always ask them about their level of arts involvement and engagement, because for him, it was a proxy for creativity. Oh, then he'd always say, except for my bank tellers. I don't want creative bank tellers. Everybody else. But this is really reflective of the way the new economy and the new workforce, this was happening before the pandemic, but the fact is, workers these days, they got a lot of choices about where they can live and where they can work, and HR people are like, how do we get you here? And the responses, and this is like an international phenomenon, look, you want me to be creative and innovative in your workplace. I'm a creative and innovative person in my life. So what is there to do in this community? I want arts and culture, I want festivals, I want arts maker spaces, I want arts education for my kids. That is really important for creative workers. And this is all one more benefit that we get with this creative, culturally vibrant community that we live in. So that's just another upside, that I wanted to talk about. So does that make sense? All right, so this makes now, a really strong case for what I honestly think is one of the most important things we could be focusing on, arts education. And, the data is so powerful about the benefits of an education that includes the arts to a student. I'll tell you about a study. There used to be a UCLA researcher, James Cavanaugh, who studied arts education for years, long trend studies, and he used data from 25,000 students in 1,000 schools across the country. Big representative national data set from the Department of Education. And what he did is he put those students into 4 quartiles based on their level of arts involvement. Up here, practices violin 3 hours a day, and then down there, got to the museum a couple times last year or something. And he compared academic performance. And what he found, the more arts-involved students have better grade point averages, better standardized test scores, lower dropout rates, even evidence of better attitudes about community engagement, community service. Because I know you're all good consumers of research, right? You're probably thinking well, great, but aren't these students, maybe they're from better educated or from more affluent families, and might you expect them to do better? So he controlled for that. He went back to his base of 25,000 students and looked at the lowest socioeconomic quartile. So students attending Title I schools, students living in low-income communities. And what he found, and then he did the same analysis, that not only did the results hold, but there was an even greater disparity between the arts involved and the less arts involved students. Helping education researchers think, maybe the arts help level the playing field for students who got a late start to catch up. Really powerful research. Now, put that study right here for a second, because I want to tell you about something else. Every decade or so, the U.S. Department of Education does a big national look at how much arts education's out there. They put a big temperature gauge and beat thermometer in the ground. And it's over the years, nationally it stays pretty steady, and locally sometimes it's up and it's down and all that type of thing. But what they have found, the researchers have found consistently over the years is students of color, students living in low-income communities, students attending Title I schools have experienced a huge loss in their arts education. So much so that several secretaries of education ago called this a civil rights issue. Because the data are so powerful. I mean, it's so powerful, it's so upsetting. Of the evidence of students within our education in the arts doing better academically, but Catterall even followed these students as to young adulthood. And you saw more to the college going, more likely to be in career-oriented jobs, all kinds of positive outcomes. So this is an ongoing issue. This is something I think we just gotta talk about and fight more than ever, because it's just, this is our future, you know, and it's not just about the next generation of artists, you know, that'll happen. It's just like more, you know, civically engaged and, you know, creative, critical thinkers, right? You know, just people we want as neighbors. And so the arts education data is really powerful. And this is what this starts to look like in action. This happy-looking fella, a couple of years ago, got the Nobel Prize for Medicine. He's a Stanford researcher. And so, you know, the reporters called him up and was like, "Professor, congratulations. Who was your most influential teacher?" One of them asked, and sure they all thought he was going to like, "Oh, I'll never forget my high school biology teacher." Without missing a beat, he said, "I owe it all to my bassoon teacher." And he went on to explain how it was his arts education that gave him the habits of mind that made him a great scientist, right? Problem identification, you know, problem solving, the ability to deal with, you know, ambiguity and multiple solutions, and collaborative, you know, work as part of a team and everything. And there's research that shows this may not be some kind of crazy isolated example. There's a Michigan State University researcher named Robert Root-Bernstein. He writes the greatest articles, and he studied creativity his whole career. And one of the things he and his team did is they studied all the Nobel laureates of the sciences going back to the beginning and looked at their level of arts involvement compared to scientists in two scientific societies, one in the US, one in the UK. The Nobel laureates 17 times more likely to be actively involved as, you know, musician, as painter. You know, something's going on here, right? You know, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. Again, this is just all about, you know, our future in so many different ways. Just a couple more real quick, and then we'll start to close up here. So this is back to my national public opinion study, and you know, I mean, our communities have been so fractious. This was before the pandemic, but you know, so much isolation that came afterwards. Yet, here again, the arts providing one of these benefits. 72% of the American public says the arts create opportunities for shared experiences with people of different race, ethnicity, age, or faith. Same percentage actually said the arts create a safe place for important community conversations, right? You know, and so, I mean, how do we get our communities connected? Well, the arts create space for that. 63%, the arts help me understand other cultures in my community. So there's a lot of powerful research about that as well. And I want to give you just one more, which I think either zoomed past. Oh, okay, that's all right. I'll just give it to you anyway. Well, we'll stay there and do it. So we got a Stanford guy there. So I've got an arts background, theater, right? But I also have a medical research background. I used to work at Stanford University and do medical research. And I worked at Scripps Clinic and Research Foundation in La Jolla, California for a number of years. And I want to talk about arts and health briefly. And I mean, you've got you've got incredible, you know, arts and health and arts in the hospitals work here in this region. You know, some of the best in the world. But you know, again, the research also underscoring these benefits. When I worked at Scripps Clinic and Research Foundation, every Tuesday we used to have live chamber music in the lobby. And it was already a beautiful lobby, and you know, it was amazing. 4 musicians completely transformed the space, and patients could walk in, be wheeled in, they bring their families. medical staff was allowed to be there. But what we started to notice is that patients, in the presence of music, in the music that we would see in their rooms clinically, lethargic, depressed, even if you had a view of the ocean and everybody there did, I mean, nobody wants to be in the hospital, right? But you could see physical transformation in people. Their eyes got less cloudy, and their posture got better, and you just sort of sense a greater awareness of the environment around them. And we all notice this. And it's like, like again, an IV trip to the arts or something like that. Something's happening here. And as many of you know, there's a growing body of research that shows when the arts are part of our healing, we have shorter hospital stays, fewer doctor visits, less medication, less depression, and even evidence that it saves money. So one more big issue our community faces is healthcare, right? And access to healthcare, where the arts are making a positive impact. So so start to wrap up here, and we'll kind of transition a bit. You're looking at a picture here from Paris in 1913. Bad news at the Louvre. The Mona Lisa was stolen in 1913. It took them 2 years to get it back. And this is where the Mona Lisa had been hanging. But in the 2 years the Mona Lisa was missing, more people went to see where it had been hanging than where this goes. And so the painting itself in the previous 14 years. It's so easy for our community leaders, everybody to take artists and arts organizations for granted, right? To assume just, we're always going to be there, always going to be in the community. Well, we got a job to do to remind people that our work requires investment. And there are policies, that can be favorable policies, that affect access to the arts and arts funding. So we've got to be real champions. We've got to be advocates for the arts, and this is, this is the take action, part of the program. So, there's whole libraries on lobbying and advocacy and all that kind of thing. I break it down to 3 simple questions. What's the message? Who gets the message? And who delivers the message? So, as advocates, first question, we need a quiver full of case-making arrows, right? I mean, we got to talk about all the benefits that the arts bring to our community. And, economics is a good one, but, this might be the mental health congressperson, and this might be the, healthcare legislator or something. So, we got to be able to, pull all those arrows out and be ready to rock, right? That 10 reasons to support the arts, there's 10 messages right there. Put that in your pocket, never take it out. You'll be ready with your messages. Second question, who gets the message? And that's where we do a little bit of our research. Who are those decision makers, those authorizers in our environment? It might be, a committee on city council, it might be a CEO, it might be a trustees. And what do those people care about? And again, lead with that, right? Your government leaders are going to care a lot about jobs and government revenue. Your business leaders are really going to care, once they hear about economic impact, they want to hear about education and 21st century workforce. The public, they don't really get economic impact, but they get arts education and they get community of life, quality of life and well-being, right? So, what's the message? And then the third question, I think, is sometimes just the most important one. Who delivers the message? And so they bring me up to the Capitol a lot in DC to do member briefings and staff briefings. They see me coming a mile away, right? It's like, here he comes, guys cover up their wallets, maybe it's my person. But if I can bring, a hospital CEO, a military officer, an artist, a school superintendent, to talk about how the arts impact their community and their work, totally changes the conversation, right? I think the gentleman that I was going to tell the arts and public safety story about. So a few years ago, when he said to step out, it looked like. But a couple of years ago, we had the mayor of Mesa, Arizona, on a panel, and it was about advocacy. He was telling a story of how it was budget hearing night for the arts, and so he said, well, it was me and the city council on both sides, and 60 people lined up to do their 3 minutes. And he said, I noticed that the chief of police was there that night. which in itself wasn't that unusual, he said, but he was in full chief of police regalia, hat, tie, medals. He said that was a little different. And then after everybody else had done their 3 minutes, he asked for 3 minutes and got up there and said, you know, if you gotta take a cut out of the arts budget, I'd rather you just took it out of my public safety budget. Because when they do their job well, it makes my job easier. You know, imagine if we had 1,000 police chiefs on that message. Problem solved. So remember the 3 questions. And then lastly, I've got a golden rule of advocacy. No numbers without a story, no stories without a number. We're the arts. We are all about stories, you know, of how somebody's life was transformed. It could have been our own, could have been a child that was part of the program. Could be, I have an organization and like I pay all these different industries. I support all these businesses, these trades in the community. Or the last time I went to an arts event, I spent $42 and 9 cents, not including the cost of admission. So tell that story and then follow it up with a number. Those are the unforgettable visits for advocacy. And be relentless in the messaging. It's not one and done. You know, meet with your elected leaders and don't let your first meeting be the last. You gotta come back again and again, build that relationship, build that trusted voice, for the arts in the community. Because everything you do to advance the arts is important for the community. You're important for doing it. Thanks very much.